Our gospel reading for today comes from the 9th chapter of Luke, Luke's account of the Transfiguration. It takes place immediately or shortly after. The very last thing in the gospel prior to it is some teachings of Jesus, which are noted in our reading. Those teachings are about the need for his followers to deny themselves and take up the cross, to lose their life rather than seek to save it. Those are what are echoing when we began the reading today. Listen for what the Spirit may say to us as we hear these words. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my Son, the chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent in those days and told no one any of the things that they had seen. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In a recent speech at a small Christian college in Iowa, Donald Trump lamented Christianity's loss of prestige in America, but promised that that would end if he was elected. Said Trump, "Because if I'm there, you're going to have plenty of power. You don't need anybody else. You're going to have somebody representing you very, very well. Remember that." Now, I appreciate Mr. Trump's concern for the state of the church, but I'm not sure he understands the nature of Christian power. It is the power of God, power made perfect in weakness, power most evident in the cross. I don't think Trump gets that at all. But I can add that based on my actions and those of denominations and congregations and all manner of other Christian entities, I'm not sure that many of us understand that either. I've been struggling lately with this issue of so many Christians doing a rather bad job of following Jesus. And I think that's why I recently heard a well-known quote from 19th century philosopher Søren Kierkegaard in a way I had not heard it before. Kierkegaard said, "People have the idea that the preacher is an actor on the stage and that they are the critics blaming or praising him. What they don't know is that they are the actors on the stage. The preacher is merely the prompter, standing in the wings, reminding them of their lost lines." Now, I've used that quote many times, always to talk about worship. But when the quote popped up on the internet the other day, what struck me were those words about lost lines. If you've ever acted at all, even in an elementary school play, you probably have some idea what it feels like to forget your lines. You can't really do your job as an actor without knowing your lines. There's no reason to go on the stage if you have no idea what to say or what to do. But what of these lost lines Kierkegaard mentions? Have we forgotten our lines, forgotten what we are supposed to say and do as actors in God's drama? Did we ever learn our lines in the first place? Did we perhaps study the wrong parts of the script and don't know the parts we need to know? Are we not so sure we want to be actors to begin with? Or do we just not like taking directions and prefer to ad lib? I think that much of the Bible, certainly most of the New Testament, was written to help us remember our lines. Because people often get caught up in debates about the historical accuracy of the Bible, or even the scientific accuracy of the Bible, it's sometimes easy to forget that the writers often are more like preachers than reporters. The gospel writers certainly are trying to remind people of lost lines, of what's crucial and important. They were writing to their congregations. Those churches already knew about Christ. They weren't introducing Jesus to anyone. They were worried about people getting off track. They were worried about people forgetting their lines. When Luke writes his version of the Transfiguration, he's not reporting some recently discovered facts. The story was well known. Mark had written about it years before Luke ever did. But Luke does use the story to prompt his congregation about their lines. The basic outline of the Transfiguration story is pretty much the same in Matthew and Mark and Luke. But Luke rearranges it slightly to really emphasize the divine voice that says, "This is my Son, the chosen. Listen to him." Listen to him. And this command to listen comes right on the heels of crucial teachings by Jesus. Anyone who wants to become my follower must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. Clearly, Luke wants to remind people that they have critical lines about self-denial, about taking up burdens for others that they could otherwise avoid, about following Jesus even in the midst of difficulty and danger, even danger to their own lives. And when Jesus gave those sayings, Luke hammered them home when Jesus says, "Those who are ashamed of me and my words, of them the Son of Man will be ashamed when he comes in his glory." In other words, these lines are crucial. Don't dare forget them. But we do. We do with enough frequency that I sometimes become disillusioned with faith and with the church. Christian voices that spew hate and crave earthly power clearly have forgotten their lines. So too have those who speak of heaven as an exclusive club reserved for those who get their beliefs just right. And butchered lines of that sort have played a big part in a general disillusionment with church and faith in our culture. But it's not just other folks who've forgotten their lines. Our denomination, our own congregation, at times seems more concerned with budgets and buildings and survival than with actually following Jesus. And that's as true of me as anyone. I get caught up in worries about money, possessions, personal comforts, success, forgetting my lines, or perhaps simply ignoring them. But a divine voice from the cloud calls me back, calls us back. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. Listen to him. As we enter into the season of Lent, I want to challenge you and me to do just that, to listen, in hopes of recovering our lost lines. One good and simple way to listen is to read a gospel. You might try Luke, since that is the gospel we're in worship this year. Try reading it at a single setting, a single reading. That's how it was originally meant to be used, and it's only 30-something pages long after all. Consider reading it all the way through every week during the season of Lent, listening for what Jesus is saying to you, listening as we let him tell us what our role and work is in the divine drama. When someone makes a profession of faith as they are joining a Presbyterian church, this question is asked: will you be Christ's faithful disciple, obeying his word and showing his love? Lord, help us to listen. Help us to remember who we are and whose we are. Help us remember our lines and to live as your faithful children in the world.